My name is Lisa, and I've been working as a researcher after completing my doctorate in graduate school. It's been 4 years since I married Adam, and we have been living with Adam's parents. Adam and I, both working at a top company, use the second floor room, while my in-laws use the first floor. We started living together in this 2-generation house 2 years ago. It didn't bother me much when we weren't living together, but ever since we started sharing our lives in this 2-generation setup, my mother-in-law began to bully me. She arbitrarily decides that I, working as a researcher, am lazy and says things like, "Must be nice for Lisa. She only has to do what she likes for a living." And, "Using work as an excuse not to have children. How carefree." She says these things when my father-in-law and husband are not around, like nagging me. Indeed, I can't deny it. When we started living together, my mother-in-law said, "It's about time for children, isn't it?" I discussed it with my husband and told her that we weren't considering children yet. From that day on, it seemed she took it badly and began bullying me persistently. When I try to go out on my day off, I find my shoes, which I had prepared at the entrance, have been stepped on and dirtied by someone. But when I ask my mother-in-law, she just says, "I don't know. Don't blame others." On my days off, which are weekdays, it's just my mother-in-law and me. It's obvious that the only person who could harass me with my shoes is her. Even though she knows I have plans on my days off, she insists, "Make lunch before you go out." And when I do as told, she complains. "It's disgusting. Too salty. I might die. Go make it again." Even when I adjust the salt and try to make it bland, she complains. "It's too bland and tasteless." It seems she's dissatisfied with whatever I do. My mother-in-law completely misunderstands my job as a researcher, thinking I just do what I like for a bit of money. "You're lucky, being a researcher and all. Your salary isn't that great, right? Using the money Adam works so hard for just to play around. What a life you have." Whenever I plan to go out on my day off, she says such things until the last minute before I leave the house. And it's not just on my days off. On work days, I'm the last to leave the house. As I'm putting on my shoes at the entrance, she stands behind me, looking down and grumbling. It's impressive how she can say the same thing every single day. It became such a daily occurrence that I started to care less. Well, it would have been better if it was just at home where I was being told off, but one day I found out something. My mother-in-law was bad-mouthing me to the neighbors. "Our daughter-in-law just does whatever she likes, making Adam work all the time. She hardly does any housework. Such a lazy daughter-in-law." All untrue. She must know that I hang the laundry in the garden, yet she was speaking ill of me to the neighbors on the other side of the fence. I was furious when I realized she had been speaking about me to the neighbors, perhaps intentionally loud enough for me to hear. In the neighborhood, I'm seen as the daughter-in-law who gallivants despite earning little, who deliberately avoids having children, who can't do household chores properly, and who makes only her husband work. I ended up being perceived with such an unfair negative impression. Indeed, my husband and I both work, so we only clean our rooms on the weekends. But our living space and my in-laws' living space are completely separate on the first and second floors, so we shouldn't be causing any trouble. Despite this, my mother-in-law is probably dissatisfied with everything no matter what I do, since she dislikes my being. So, she bullies me every chance she gets, and spreads these words to the neighbors. My husband and I have always liked cleanliness, and we have minimal furniture in our room. Because we keep things to a minimum, we can maintain cleanliness without cleaning every day. Yet, my mother-in-law says things like, "Adam is to be pitied if you don't clean the room," and "Don't you notice the dust?" This made me wonder, why does my mother-in-law know about the dust in our room? When I subtly asked my mother-in-law about it, she clearly became agitated and insisted, "I just happened to see inside your room on the second floor when I was cleaning the stairs. You have so much free time. You should at least clean properly. Our room is always closed, so it shouldn't be visible from the outside. But when I pressed further, my mother-in-law got angry and locked herself in her room, leaving the truth unknown. It seems that in my mother-in-law's eyes, her son, Adam, who graduated from a prestigious university and works at a top company, sets the standard. She seems to think I, a researcher, am not a good match for her son. Even though I work hard every day and earn a decent salary, my mother-in-law seems to want to label me as a lazy daughter-in-law, or a daughter-in-law who relies on her husband's modest earnings. One day, as I was about to leave for work, my mother-in-law stopped me. Today is your father's hospital day. Can you accompany him? No. I have work now. I don't care about that. He's not feeling well. You're his daughter, so you should accompany your father. She said this unilaterally. My father-in-law's legs haven't been good, and my mother-in-law always used to accompany him. Since my mother-in-law locked herself in her room, I reluctantly contacted my workplace, took a day off, and accompanied my father-in-law to the hospital. My father-in-law said, "Sorry, Lisa, I know you're busy," and treated me to a meal on the way back. I like my father-in-law, so I don't mind helping like this. If she had told me in advance, I could have taken a day off from work. Thinking this, I returned home, only to find my mother-in-law was not there. My father-in-law, tired, went back to his room and lay down, so he didn't know, but it turned out that my mother-in-law had just gone out with neighbors that day. She had forgotten about my father-in-law's hospital day and made plans with neighbors, prioritizing her own schedule and forcing me to accompany him instead. When I confronted her about lying, she just said, "You're practically playing every day, so it's fine for me to have some time off, right?" I had reached my limit. Every day, the nasty comments and bad reputations among the neighbors. To top it off, being forced to take a day off work based on her lies. My life was increasingly disrupted by my mother-in-law's whims. We should never have agreed to live together in the first place. After my husband and I got married, my father-in-law had an accident and was left with paralysis in his legs. Then my mother-in-law said, "I feel nervous being all by ourselves, just my husband and me, so please live with us." So 2 years after our marriage, we built this 2-generation house and decided to live with my in-laws. Back then, my mother-in-law said, "You don't have to adjust your life to ours. Just being the same place is enough." "You don't have to worry about me, Lisa. Please, I'm begging you." She said this in tears, so I reluctantly agreed to live together. But in the end, I fell right into my mother-in-law's trap. Anyway, my husband and I wanted a home of our own, and we built a spacious house with a few steps, suitable for our old age. Of course, I'm referring to the space on the first floor where my in-laws live now. We both paid for it, thinking about all this. Yet my mother-in-law shows no gratitude towards me, and on top of that, she bullies me. How can she do such things? Thinking about it, I felt silly for staying in this house quietly. All this time, I've been trying not to think deeply about it, but maybe that itself was a stressor for me. One day, my husband saw me lying down before sleep and was shocked.
"Hey, Lisa, your head."
What? Looking in the mirror after what my husband said, I saw a small, bald spot, the same size as a $quarter coin.
"Isn't that alopecia areata? Is your job really that stressful?"
He looked at me with concern. Right, my husband doesn't know anything about the bullying from his mother, so he thinks the stress I'm under is only from work. I never told my husband because I didn't want to spoil the atmosphere at home, or rather, I didn't want to speak ill of my beloved husband's mother. However, the stress physically manifesting in me became unbearable, and the tears I had been holding back began to flow.
"Lisa, what's wrong? If something is bothering you, please talk to me."
While wiping away my tears, my husband said that. I decided to tell him everything. I want to be reimbursed for the entire cost of building this house. When I said this, my husband's eyes widened in shock and he exclaimed,
"What? Why are you saying this all of a sudden?"
However, after I finished telling him everything about the past 2 years since we started living together, he was in tears.
"I see. All this has been going on for 2 years. I'm sorry. I didn't notice anything. It must have been tough for you, Lisa."
He said this and hugged me. It seemed he understood my feelings and said,
"Let's go talk to my parents right away."
He took my hand and we headed downstairs.
"Dad, Mom, we need to talk."
He said this and sat opposite his parents. I sat next to him facing forward. As my husband rubbed my back, I took a deep breath and said, "I can't tolerate Mother's bullying anymore. It seems she doesn't like me, so I want to be repaid for the construction cost I contributed to." The in-laws were shocked, especially my mother-in-law, who started to panic. My father-in-law, confused, asked,
"What do you mean?"
So I told him everything I had just told my husband, including the incident when I accompanied him to the hospital, and my mother-in-law was actually out with neighbors. This made my father-in-law visibly angry, even though he didn't say anything. Sensing this, my mother-in-law desperately said, "But Lisa hardly earns anything, right? The cost for this house was almost all paid by Adam." Then my husband firmly replied,
"Mom, just so you know, Lisa earns the same or even more than me. Her research is commissioned by the county and the nation. It's a very honorable job, yet you arbitrarily decide she doesn't earn much."
However, my mother-in-law was stubborn. "Even if that's true, this daughter-in-law deliberately avoids having children to spite me. What an ungrateful person!" "That's not it." Before I could explain, my husband interrupted.
"The decision about children was made by both of us. It's not about deliberately not having them or infertility. We want to focus on our careers right now. It's none of your business, Mom."
"You don't have to say it like that." Overwhelmed by her son's intensity, my mother-in-law's face grew increasingly pale. Ignoring her, my husband continued.
"Initially, we agreed not to interfere in our marital affairs, yet you rummage through our room and dump your household chores on Lisa."
My husband's irritation was palpable as he sat beside me. My mother-in-law was clearly overwhelmed by the pressure from both her son and her husband. Then, my husband revealed a fact to my in-laws.
"I've kept quiet until now, but the construction cost of this house was assisted by Lisa's mother. It wasn't just our money. Lisa was told to keep it a secret from you, but I can't hold it back anymore."
Hearing this, my in-laws' eyes widened in surprise. Indeed, when it came to the cost of building the house, my husband and I didn't contribute much. My father had passed away a few years earlier, leaving an inheritance, which my mother had saved. When I mentioned building a 2-generation house, she offered to use my father's inheritance for it. At first I refused, but my mother insisted.
"You have the right to use it."
So I gratefully accepted her offer. However, I thought it would be best to keep it a secret from my in-laws, thinking they would feel obligated, so I asked my husband to keep it confidential. Upon learning everything, my mother-in-law hung her head, her ears red. Seeing this, my father-in-law sternly said,
"Make up for what you've done for Lisa right away, and tomorrow go to the neighborhood and tell them you've been deceiving them. Retract everything bad you said about Lisa."
Hearing this, my husband added,
"I also don't want to live with a mother who treats my precious wife like this. So I want to sell this house and return the money to Lisa and Lisa's mom. Dad, is that okay?"
he asked his father. My father-in-law nodded firmly, but my mother-in-law, crying, pleaded, "Please, don't do that. I love living in this house." She was sobbing and her face was a mess. Fed up with such selfish behavior, I showed her my patch of hair loss from alopecia areata and said firmly, "I've reached my limit too. I don't want to suffer anymore." Even my typically unyielding mother-in-law fell silent and hung her head. The next day, my father-in-law and Adam, along with my mother-in-law, went around the neighborhood correcting the lies and fabrications she had spread. My father-in-law and husband praised me as a truly wonderful daughter-in-law, and since then I've been free from my mother-in-law's bullying and the strange looks from neighbors. After discussing it with my husband, we ultimately decided to sell the house. My mother-in-law, feeling uncomfortable because of the lies she had spread in the neighborhood, agreed to move. My father-in-law mentioned moving to an apartment near his workplace, where they could live more peacefully. On our end, we returned the money from the house sale to my mother, but she insisted.
That was your share of the inheritance. Use it as you wish.
With that money, we built a new house roughly halfway between our workplaces, and now we're living a relaxed life together. Occasionally, my mother visits and teases.
Isn't it wonderful living with the person you love? Just the two of you?
I have something I want to tell her the next time she comes. Next year, there will be 3 of us.